Good afternoon and happy Friday. Happy summer solstice 2025. It's the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. So hopefully everyone can get out and enjoy that later this afternoon, especially when temperatures cool down and we get a really nice extended evening. In this WeatherCast USA Quickcast, we're going to detail the upcoming heat dome that builds across much of the US, as well as look at the severe weather risk over the next couple days. And we'll see, is there any snowfall chances in the continental US over the next couple days? So let's get into it. Here's a look at those current conditions. We can see most of that storm activity up here along that northern tier as the heat dome starts to build here in the central plains. A little bit of shower and storm activity across the Great Lakes into central Illinois. That's dissipating. That's leftover activity from the activity that started overnight and in the afternoon yesterday in the prairies of Canada and into the Dakotas. That transitions all the way down here over the morning hours of Friday, June 20th. You can see a very quiet but warm atmosphere here in the Central Plains. You might get a few severe storms isolated from Nebraska, eastern Colorado on the front range of the Rockies, all the way down into northern New Mexico. We will look for an isolated chance there. The desert Southwest stays dry and hot from California all the way over to southern Nevada, southern Utah, much of Arizona staying very hot and dry this time of year. The monsoon hasn't kicked in yet. The Pacific Northwest, that's our only real cool spot here over the next couple days, staying cool, a little bit cloudy, and also a chance for more precip. And you can see that heat and dry conditions spreading across the eastern US as well. Areas that got severe weather yesterday, staying pretty calm today, and even less of a chance of shower and thunderstorm activity across the Gulf Coast. This time of year, we can always get those pop-up showers and storms, but over the weekend and even into early next week, we'll detail the reasons why it's going to be even a little quieter here on the southeast and Gulf Coast. Currently, a few thunderstorms popping off here with that daytime heating and that trailing boundary here across central Florida. Over the next couple of days, we can really see that building area of humidity. These are mid-70s dew points reaching all the way up into northern Minnesota. That's going to be one of the reasons that sparked that severe weather over the next 24 hours. We can see those dew points spread east across the lower Great Lakes, areas like Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, and then into the northeast here by the end of the weekend. So much of the eastern two-thirds of the country are going to see hot conditions, but also very humid conditions. Then we see those drier dew points here to the southwest, areas around the Four Corners into Nevada and California. Only those higher dew points along the immediate Pacific coast up into the Pacific Northwest. And much the same with those dew points for the temperatures. We can see 90s pushing 100 here in the Central Plains, and that spreads to the east over the next couple days. By Saturday and Sunday, those 90s temperatures are going to spread well into the northeast, pushing 100 here in the East Coast, as well as still pushing 100 here in parts of the Central Plains. I'll pause that loop here on the Sunday temperatures because the Sunday temperatures are going to look very similar to the temperatures into at least the middle of next week. So again, we see those hot conditions here from the southern plains, again, pushing 100 here in areas like Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma, as well as 90s, well into the 90s here across the lower Great Lakes, 90s here into southeast Pennsylvania, areas around New York City, pushing into those 90s, and certainly mid-90s here in the mid-Atlantic. So very hot, humid environment here for the eastern two-thirds of the country. This is going to be the look here at least into the middle of next week. By Tuesday, Wednesday, we might get a little bit of a break here with a backdoor cold front sliding into the New England area. But I think even New England here over the weekend into Monday is going to be pretty hot. The only real break from the heat is going to be here in the Pacific Northwest and also into the Northern Rockies, where temperatures are going to stay in the 30s in some of those highest elevations. And I asked that question earlier, are we going to see any snow in the continental US over the week? And the answer is yes. So for snow, if you want to break from those hot temperatures on the eastern two-thirds of the country with temperatures into the 90s, heat indices with those high dew points into the low hundreds for many of those areas we just talked about. If you want to break from that, it's going to be here into the Northern Rockies, especially northern and western Montana, all the way into northern parts of Idaho. A few spots on the highest elevations of the Cascades here in Oregon and Washington. The models show a little bit of snow there, but yeah, primarily it's going to be back here with those extended cooler temperatures and those rounds of precip coming into this area. The pink here on the models, that indicates areas here close to a foot of snowfall. So in those highest elevations, we could see a foot of snowfall here in the Northern Rockies, even a few inches possible here in the northwest corner of Wyoming over the next couple days. And there's some areas here around Glacier National Park. These lighter pink colors indicate some potential for even over a foot of snowfall, maybe closer to that 18 inches kind of mark. So still a pretty hefty June snowfall. It sounds weird saying that myself. When most of us are baking in the summer temperatures this week, it's gonna be snowing here in the Rockies. Now this is not snow. This is a model depicting our precipitation totals, and this really just reinforces what we talked about a little bit ago here with the dew points and the temperatures. We can see the precip is really confined in those heavier thunderstorms across the northern plains into the Great Lakes and into a little bit here into New England. We also do have still the chances of some rounds of storms, especially on the Florida Peninsula with sea breezes and along the central Gulf Coast. But as I mentioned earlier, you can see much of the southeast a little bit quieter in the chances of precip. Again, some isolated shower and storm activity on the lee side of the Rockies, potentially here from extreme western Texas up through New Mexico and into areas here in western Kansas, Nebraska over the next couple days. But much of the U.S. is going to stay hot and dry. And we've had a very active start to the hurricane season in the eastern Pacific. The last couple days, we had Hurricane Eric reach major hurricane status and impact areas in western Mexico. The different story for the Caribbean and the Atlantic Basin, it's going to be pretty quiet over the next at least another 7 days in the Atlantic Basin. We don't see any indications of any storms developing here over the next week. Part of the reason here, and we can see that here, there's actually a lot of shear over the Atlantic Basin. You can see some of those trade winds on some of those lower level clouds. They're moving from the east to the west across the Caribbean. But here on the upper levels, we can see that sheared environment. A lot of that faster, higher cloud motion is off from the west to the east. And that's just too sheared of an environment to build any sustained convective development that initiates tropical development. We've also seen layers of Saharan dust blowing across the Atlantic. So that also suppresses any of that tropical development. It's just, in general, not a favorable environment across the Atlantic Basin right now for tropical activity. So if you have any plans here getting into next week, into the 4th of July holiday week, to go to the beaches, to go to Florida and the Gulf Coast, things do look like they're going to be fairly calm in the tropics, at least over those next 7 to 10 days. So let's detail the severe weather over the weekend. For Friday, June 20th, we see the Storm Prediction Center has a large area of marginal risk stretching from Montana all the way back into the lower peninsula of Michigan. Within that, we have a large slight risk extending from the UP of Michigan all the way into eastern Montana. And then within that, we have an enhanced risk. This is an all hazards enhanced risk, the possibility of some strong tornadoes, potentially EF2 plus tornadoes, large hail over 2 inches in diameter, some very large hail potentially, and then also damaging winds, hurricane force damaging winds in excess of 75 miles an hour are possible across this enhanced risk area, and also extending into that slight risk area as well. So an all hazards threat developing this evening and then into the overnight. This models show convective development initiating here in eastern Montana, possibly in the form of supercells with an all hazards threat, and then developing into a cluster of storms that eventually works as a convective system across to the north and east, across the in areas here in northern Minnesota, and then into the Great Lakes, into the overnight hours. And that may work its way down into lower Michigan late overnight, early morning hours into Saturday. We also do, as I mentioned earlier, have an isolated chance of some severe storms here in the lee side of the Rockies from northern New Mexico all the way here into southern parts of Nebraska. And as that activity works its way from the northern Midwest and into the Great Lakes overnight, the Storm Prediction Center currently has a slight risk from the areas here in the UP of Michigan all the way across the northern portions of the lower peninsula of Michigan. Southern Ontario is also going to be in a risk for severe weather tomorrow, and then even into western New York, parts of western New England, potentially getting some reinvigorated storms there tomorrow afternoon. We're going to see that convective system work its way across this area, especially in those overnight and early morning hours. Some of the models are mixed on this. Some models indicate reinvigoration as the daytime heating heats up and continues that convective system. Other models show that convective system breaking down, but the outflow boundaries that are left from that help spark new development. So either way, if it's either or if it's a mix of both, we may see a little bit more of an enhanced area of severe weather here across the Great Lakes on Saturday. And on Sunday, more storms in the upper Midwest into the upper Great Lakes here. Again, that ring of fire is setting up. So around that heat dome, around that high pressure, that's where we have the storm activity. It's going to force that jet stream up to the north and force those little pieces of energy that come out of troughing in the west across the northern plains, across the northern Great Lakes, and then also similar to next week, across a little bit of an area here into New England. So that's going to keep New England a little bit cooler from those 90s and 100s that are further south, but also a little bit more stormy here in New England. So for Sunday, the Storm Prediction Center outlines a slight risk from central Nebraska all the way up through much of Minnesota and into the northern UP of Michigan. Thanks for joining us for another quick cast on WeatherCast USA. Don't forget to like and subscribe and click that bell icon to get notifications when we post new forecast videos or when we go live for severe weather coverage. We'll likely be covering a lot of the severe weather over the northern tier of the country over the weekend, so definitely stay tuned, like and subscribe. Also share with friends and family that are in those risk areas. Thank you very much. Have a very safe and happy summer solstice and a safe and happy weekend, and we'll keep it here on WeatherCast USA, covering severe weather activity as well as forecast videos and weather updates